Good evening, friends. Namaste, and welcome to this webcast organized by the Direct Taxation Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. As you are aware, that Finance Act makes various provisions, and generally those provisions are applicable to the next assessment year. However, provisions relating to deduction of tax at source or collection of tax at source are applicable from the current year, and just allowing time to pass the finance bill, make it Finance Act, it takes some time. Also, it requires some time for the purpose of stakeholders to understand the new provisions. Therefore, generally, these provisions relating to TDS are made applicable either from June or July. Now, in this case, certain provisions have come into play from 1st day of July 2022. One of the important provisions in TDS is concerning TDS on benefits and perquisites in the arena of business or profession. As we are aware that in case of any person who gets income may be both in cash, it may be in kind. And as far as tax law is concerned, it takes into its sweep both income received in cash as well as income received in kind. In case of salaried persons, we are very familiar with the provisions relating to taxation of perquisites, which are confirmed on the employees by employer. And also the provision of TDS is available as far as this perquisites is concerned in the hands of employees. Elaborate rules have been made because for number of years perquisites were confirmed on employee sector. TDS responsibility is also there with the employer. So as to how to consider this TDS responsibility, the provision for valuation of perquisites and benefits is elaborately made in the law. But now this new provision of TDS on benefits and perquisites in the arena of business and profession has been enacted. As far as this income is concerned, that was taxable with the amendment in section 28, where this item of benefits and perquisites while carrying on business and profession was included. However, it appears that not very significant returns included this type of benefits of perquisite. So now, in order to tap those benefits and perquisites, a specific provision has been made that where while you are conducting your business or professional activities, you are making available some benefits or perquisites to the other persons associated with you as a businessman. So while they are doing trade with you, while they are doing business with you or rendering professional services, it is possible that they may be beneficiaries of those perquisites. In order to tap those perquisites, now onerous responsibility of making TDS or ensuring payment of tax from those perquisites has also been cast on the businessman. It is therefore consequential that all the chartered accountants are inquired with query from businessmen, from professionals, कि हमारा ये responsibility हम कैसे निभाएं? How do we ascertain that perquisite is given? If I have organized information for the purpose of informing my new product, I have arranged a dinner meeting of my dealers. My main purpose is to give information about the new product or a new variety of the product. In that case, I am just going to inform them with this information. They will be able to sell my product. They will be able to satisfy the customers about various queries. And whatever dinner, etc., is given is incidental. It is not the dominant object. So whether that will be considered as perquisite or it will be considered as legitimate business expenditure, as also for the persons attending those meetings, can they say that my object for attending is to know this new product or new variety of the product or service so that I can sell it to the customers and earn the business. So for having knowledge about my business profession, I attended that meeting and there is no fun in it. So it is not a perquisite. So section 194R deals with this particular provision relating to TDS. And as I stated that maybe this and a number of other issues may come up. On the top of it, the Central Board of Direct Taxes has issued circular number 12 of 2022. I think either clarifying or confusing these provisions that we will know from the experts. So Direct Taxation Committee and particularly CA Dr. Raj Chawla, Vice Chairman of Direct Taxation Committee, thought of this particular panel discussion on new provision relating to TDS under section 194R and with a specific reference and analysis of CBDT Circular number 2 of 2022. And we are very fortunate in order to enlighten us on this particular topic. We have with us former Income Tax Appellate Tribunal member Shri IP Bansalji. I welcome you, Bansalji, and thank for sparing your valuable time. Along with Bansalji, we have our chartered accountant who are seasoned in the arena of direct taxes. CA Asim Chawla ji, welcome Asimji.
Thank you, sir.
CA Virinder Paul, Virinder Puri, CA Sunil Garg, both of them would have also joined. I welcome both of them. And with these introductory remarks, now I also welcome CA Dr. Raj Chawla, who is Vice Chairman of this committee. And as I stated earlier, he is the chief architect of this particular today's panel discussion. And he always is very enthusiastic as far as activities of Direct Taxes Committee is concerned. And this is one more visible demonstration of his initiative. So before we start this panel discussion, maybe as a forward, Raj bhai, you can offer your remarks and then you can hand over this particular for the panel discussion. Over to you, Raj bhai.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. First of all, my thanks that you have given me the permission to organize this webinar, and I welcome CA Asim Chawla ji, Dr. Advocate IP Bansal ji, ex-ITT member, CA Vidur Puri ji, my friend CA Sunil Garg ji, on this discussion on this income tax, and I am thankful to the Chairman CA Chitale ji for giving this opportunity. Thank you, sir. And I am sorry for the late because of some prayer meeting I was there. So I am sorry for the late joining. Unmute, sir. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, so
Chitle,
over
sir.
to the panel. Now the panel
you,
can start its innings.
Thank you, sir. At the outset, we welcome all the panelists, and before that, our gratitude to Shri Chitle Sahib and to our dynamic Central Council member Rajji. Under Chitle Sahib's leadership, Direct Tax Committee has done several initiatives, and I think the Central Board of Direct Taxes is going to keep Chitle Sahib and Rajji fairly busy for the remaining part of the year up until the pre-budget and the budget comes, and the way the after effect of Finance Act 2022 is still being felt and absorbed. It's not very, it won't take much time before the 2023 season catches up, and I think both of them are doing a very fantastic job. In this only a few days ago, we celebrated our CA Day, so to speak, and the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav 75th year, and considering the vintage of our accountancy profession, I think having crossed 7 decades, it's a great tribute to the service which both these gentlemen are doing in espousing the cause of profession. I'm very fortunate enough to be part along with Sunil Bhai, Bansal Saab, and our very dear Vidur to contribute in whatever ways we could. Rajji keeps us on our toes and keeps us honest and continues to push and make sure that we are able to realize our full potential. I understand, Rajji, you have also expressed your keen desire that crypto is a subject which the Direct Tax Committee should also attend to, and hopefully in the coming weeks under your and Chitle Sahib's leadership, we will put together something for your consideration. But without much ado, let's come to the
Asimji, just to enlighten that Direct Tax Committee is coming out with a handbook on taxation of cryptocurrency. Next week it will be released. Yeah,
that's a great milestone in the calendar of DTC, and
yes. And also Direct Tax Committee is releasing this month end guidance note on tax audit. So if anybody has any suggestions, maybe they are also welcome. And I can take occasion that there are two clauses, 30C and 44, relating to impermissible transactions and GST. Rajbhai and myself have made representation to the CBDT to remove those clauses or to at least postpone for this year, because many queries were coming. So we will also be taking that into its own.
Grateful, sir. Thank you
Yeah.
for your
Thank
very
you.
enlightened interventions. I think they really help everybody, especially the knowledge and the awareness part of it, which through this platform goes to the nook and corner of the country. Now, coming to subject matter of today's discussion, and first of all, my deep gratitude to my esteemed fellow panelist, Garg Saab, Bansal Saab, and as I said, very dear Vidur, for having agreed to collaborate one more time at a short notice. And we will go through the provision, and we will also go through, as Chitle Sahib said, the circular, whether it brings confusion or it genuinely removes difficulties. As I said, the theme of our webinar today is contentions, or I mean, whether it is contentious in nature or not. So without much ado, I think let's quickly go through the section. The way we have kept the format for the remaining good 100 odd minutes, it's a 2-hour session. We'll go through the basic provision. We'll go through the 10 questions or the 10 Q&A or guidance as the CBDT is called for it. We will have views from, to begin with, from Mr. Puri. He has thankfully sketched a very brief presentation just to keep focus, and then Bansal Saab, as always, will give his sort of holistic view, considering that he has a vast experience of leading the bench. And then uh, before we open for questions and some interventions from fellow panelist, Garg Saab also wishes to make his interventions, but Garg Saab wants to take advantage of listening everybody today before he comes up with his views. So Garg Saab will have the last laugh, and then we'll take some questions, and after that see how much has to be done. Technology permitting, I hope we'll be able to put everything together. So I'll just request the tech support if I'll just share the screen on the basic provision to begin with. So I hope the screen is visible to all of you. It's blank. Is it visible?
No, sir.
Okay, let me see. As I said, technology.
Technical team, please help. Asim Bhai Sahib, if you want to send this your PPT to us, our technical team will support you. They can run this PPT.
No, I'm just trying to share the screen. I hope
Okay.
let's see. Is it visible?
Yeah. Now it's
Yes, now it is visible.
Okay, great. So this is the section. The section is right in front of you, just to so that we can channelize and focus our thoughts. If you look at the section, the first section has 3 provisos, and the entire provision of section 194R is divided amongst 3 subsections. To begin with, the phraseology of subsection 1 is very unique. If you were to see the subsection 1, it says any person responsible for providing to a resident any benefit or perquisite. So for the first time we find a phrase in the TDS provision, responsible for providing to a resident. It doesn't use the phrase making payment or at the time of making payment, it says providing to a resident. Any person responsible for providing to a resident. So what would be the catchment of any person? We will come to later. Any benefit of perquisite, whether convertible into money or not, arising from business or exercise of profession by such resident shall. So there is a mandate that it is mandatory in nature, shall, before providing. It is not saying at the time of making payment or at the time of making credit, the usual TDS provision it has. It says before providing such benefit, ensure that tax has been deducted in respect of such benefit or perquisite at the rate of 10% of the value or aggregate of value of such benefit or perquisite. So quick takeaways: any person who is responsible for providing. It doesn't say responsible for making available. It doesn't say responsible for paying. It says responsible for providing to a resident. And before providing, as I said, before providing, ensure that tax has been deducted in respect of such benefit or perquisite. Now, if you look at the first proviso, it says in a case where it is not in cash, it's wholly in kind or partly in cash or partly in kind, then in such a situation, the person responsible for providing such benefit shall, before releasing the benefit. Now kindly see, these are new lines. It says before releasing the benefit. So before releasing the benefit, ensure that tax is required to be deducted. This is important. Before releasing the benefit. So if I am responsible for providing, before I release the benefit, I need to ensure that the tax is deducted. Then the second proviso provides a threshold of 20,000 rupees for aggregate. The third proviso provides a similar dispensation which we see in cases of situation where receipts or turnover is less than 1 crore of rupees or 50 lakhs. Then in that case, this particular provisions of section would not apply. Subsection 2 is where this particular guidance or Q&A or a circular comes into picture, because subsection 2 says if any difficulty arises in giving effect to the provision, the board with the approval of central government issue guidelines, and that guidelines shall be laid before the house. This is what the particular provision says. So this is all in all. Let me just go back to few important aspects of 194. Responsible for providing, before providing, ensure tax has been deducted, and if it is in a situation where cash is not sufficient or it is non-monetary in nature completely or partly, before providing, the person responsible before releasing the benefit. So two different connotation. Is provision different from making release, or making release the benefit is synonym with providing the benefit? So can you equate these two terms? If these terms are synonym, then why release had to be provided in contradistinction to the word provision? So therefore, is the provision word different from the phrase before release? That is one takeaway. So usually you find the TDS provisions drawn in a manner where the recipient and the payer are reflected in a manner where either a person responsible for making payment at the time of making payment. So that has been completely done away with. It's a new avatar of drafting, a new format of drafting, and let's see what comes out of it. So I think that's enough for the moment in terms of the provision is concerned. Any views, any thoughts of the panelists at this point in time? If there are anything which we wish to discuss or consider, we may do so. Vidur, do you have any thought at this point in time?
No, Asim, I think if you read it, as you rightly said, that this is a new way of reading things. So possibly when you say before providing is per se the entire section itself in one, and before releasing is akin to which is partly in kind. So maybe that is the drafting thought that you may provide it, but when you release a particular something in kind, that's when the trigger could be. That's my interpretation, but I think that's the way it has been can be read.
Bansal Saab, any quick intervention?
This wording you have read in subsection 1 from first line, any benefit or perquisites, whether convertible into money or not, is bodily lifted from the clause 4 of
28.
bodily lifted.
Yes, agreed.
And then proviso is extension to that.
Yes, agreed.
Proviso is extension to that.
Yes.
It is adding something which was not there earlier in clause 4.
Right, sir. Okay, now very quickly, technology permitting, I will make an attempt to screen share the circular for the benefit of the audience. Yeah, is the circular visible now?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, great. I've succeeded on the first attempt, so that's a great thing. Now, the circular, in fact, we would discuss certain conceptual glaring infirmities of this guidance which violate the very basic fabric and architecture, not only on first principles of TDS as a concept, but on the aspect of delegated legislation and the scope and rules of what goes into delegated legislation. So I think the circular pushes the boundary on the aspect of delegated legislation. What is the remit within which these circulars can be issued? That rather speaks the fact that how the tax collection as an exercise has taken the center stage to an extent that we've completely lost or blurred the boundaries and the dharma of what goes into the whole concept of issuance of such circulars and guidance. When we look at the interplay between the delegated legislation principles and the substantive act, in fact, if I am reminded of what the Supreme Court said in the case of Ratan Metal versus Wire Industries, it said that circular and instructions issued by board are no doubt binding in law on the authorities under the respective statutes, but when the courts declare the law on a particular question of consideration arising, it would not be appropriate for the court to direct that circular should be given effect and to the view expressed in the decision of the court and otherwise. And again, just taking this whole concept of delegated legislation a little more, there are judicial boundaries with regard to the executive use of powers to remove difficulties. It's not that the executive has a field play with regard to crossing the boundaries when it comes to what is there in the substantive law, and by no means the delegated legislation in the forms of circular can eclipse the fundamentals or the writings of the domestic law. In fact, the Supreme Court in Madhavya Upendra Saini 98 ITR 209 has said that the circulars, when you talk of removal of difficulty, it cannot change or disfigure or do violence to the basic structure and primary features of the Act. In no case can it, under the guise of removing a difficulty, change the scheme and the essential provisions of the Act. And similarly, the Supreme Court said in Straw Products Limited 68 ITR that it can be exercised in a manner which is consistent with the scheme and essential provisions of the Act and for the purpose for which it has been conferred. So I The reason why I was a little tempted or I have hastened in mentioning the facets of delegated legislation and the interplay when it comes to the role of the executive and the obligation of the executive insofar as removal of difficulty is concerned, and the way the particular guidance has been issued, I don't think it has done any justice to it, and we'll see some classic instances as we go along during the course of this webinar. So let's look at these 10 guidance. As I have said in my background, that it sounds a little contentious, or so to speak. First and foremost, you also need to keep in mind that you have Rule 30, 31, 31A, 31ACB, Rule 37BA, and Rule 114I of income tax rules, which you need to keep in mind when you are looking at this provision. And then, apart from the usual TDS related forms with regard to housekeeping and compliances, you have Form 26Q, which is a new insertion, and I have requested Vidur to just speak about it when he takes from here in a little while and gives his little brief overview after we run through the basic circular and look at the various nook and corner and the broad canvas of the circular. So once we've just gone through and climatized ourselves in terms of the length and breadth of the circular, then we'll probably deep dive into various questions. So let's look at the second paragraph of this particular circular. It says the new section mandates a person who is responsible for providing any benefit, and then later on it says the benefit may or may not be convertible into money, but should arise. So what is important is but should arise. So please mark this word, that it should arise from carrying out business or profession or from exercising a profession by such residents. So if a benefit of perquisite does not arise from carrying out of business or from exercising of profession by such resident, then I think 194R will be a matter of suspect. And as Bansal Saab has rightly said, that the provisions have been bodily lifted from 28(4) itself. Then the second paragraph talks of the non-requirement of deduction, which is the threshold of 20,000 rupees, which is the second proviso to subsection 1 of 194R, which we have just looked. And then the obligation of deduction also does not arise in such situation which are tax audit similar kind of situation. So which is the third proviso to 194R. Now comes subsection 2 of 194R, which we just saw, that it authorizes board to issue guidelines for removal of difficulties. So let's see whether there are any difficulties which are added or removed by virtue of this. Then accordingly, with the prior approval of the central government, the following guidance has been issued. Right now we have 10 questions, so we'll deal question by question. But before we do that, I have one small thought for Bansal Saab here, that Bansal Saab, if you look at the last sentence of the first page, where subsection 2 is mentioned, it says that these are binding on the income tax authority and on the person providing the benefit or perquisite. Now my question is, how can a circular be binding on the taxpayer? I understand it is binding on the authorities and not binding on the court. We all understand 131 ITR 597 KB Varghese, UCO Bank, and the decision which I had just cited a little while ago of the Honorable Supreme Court. But my thought here for larger consideration is, how can the central board make it so emphatic and saying that it is even binding on the person who is providing the benefit or the perquisite. Isn't it that circulars are not binding on taxpayer?
This is totally contrary to the established law.
Yeah.
That only benevolent circulars can be are binding on the authorities, courts. And if any other thing is there which is contrary to the substantial provision, for that courts have said that it is not binding on the courts even. So it has to be within the parameters of the substantial law. So the CBDT is no person to say that this circular will be binding on the person who is providing, who is assessing, means who is person. So authorities are bound by though, but there are also that courts are not bound by any of.
Right, sir. Now we come to the first question.
Asim, sorry, if I may intervene.
But simply mentioning makes the difficulty more difficult for the persons who are providing, because authorities, income tax authorities will say that they are bound by the circular. So it is also binding upon you.
Okay.
But we will say that according to these decisions of Supreme Court, circulars, unless they are benevolent, are not binding on the person.
Okay, Vidur, very quickly your intervention, because we have a lot of ground to cover.
The only positive for the department will be 194R subsection 3, because in the section itself is enshrined that if there are circular which is to clarify in 194 subsection 2, then it will be binding on both parties. So maybe they are drawing the inference from this particular section itself in the Act. So it's not.
No, but that validates the entire canons of delegated legislation. How can the guidance be such which sort of eclipses or overrides the substantive law? I mean, of course, by no means I can proclaim to be an expert on constitutional law, but as a student of law, this completely is like is turning it on its head, you know. I at this point in time should not sound litigious on this, but let's see how the circular is assailed in times to come. So let's look at the first guidance itself, where I feel
subsection 3 clearly says so. So they will say that this circular is in accordance with subsection 3. So you have to challenge the virus of subsection 3.
3, sir, correct.
This is
so before we get on to the whole thing of how the circular is going to further burden the roasters, let's look at the first question itself, where I think the test would lie. And if you look at the confidence or dare I say the hubris of the tax department, the first question is it necessary for the person providing to check if the amount is taxable under clause 4 of 28 of the Act before deducting? And the simple answer is no. The department does not believe that the corresponding perquisite or the corresponding benefit, regardless of the fact that whether it is taxable or not. So the deductor is not required to check whether the amount of benefit or perquisite that he is providing would be taxable in the hands of the recipient under clause 4 of 28 of the Act. I mean, I always felt that TDS, and if you go back to section 190 of the Income Tax Act, and TDS is just one of the means of collection of taxes, and it presupposes that particular payment has some constituent or semblance of income, and therefore it's a quicker, easier, efficient mode of collection of taxes. This completely belies that, because the deductor is not required to check whether the amount of benefit or perquisite that he is providing would be taxable in the hands of recipient under clause 4 of the section 28 of the Act. So completely throws section 190 off guard. And in fact, if you look at the decision, very helpful observations of the Mumbai bench in the case of Industrial Development Bank, 107 ITD 45 Mumbai, at para 17, it says that tax deduction at source liability is sort of a substitutory liability. Section 191 further makes this position clear when it lays down that the situation TDS mechanism is not provided for particular type of income or when taxes have not been deducted at source in accordance with Chapter 17. Income tax shall be payable by the assessee directly. The provisions thus shows that tax deduction liability is a vicarious liability and the principal liabilities of the person who is taxable in respect of his income. It is a sine qua non for a vicarious tax deduction liability that there has to be a principal tax liability in respect of the relevant income first, and the principal tax liability can come into existence when it can be ascertained as to who will receive or earn the income, because the tax is on the income and in the hands of the person who earns the income. So all in all, it must have some shade of income before the TDS provisions should kick in. Now here you are throwing that you're throwing the wind, you're throwing the sails to the wind, and you're completely saying no, forget the whole income concept. You need not do any fact check with regard to the aspect whether it is income or it does not constitute income. In fact, if you go a little ahead, it says there is no requirement to check. There is no requirement to check whether the amount is taxable. There is no requirement to check whether the amount is taxable in the hands of the recipient or under which section it is taxable. So that's one aspect of it. And to justify the same, it further reiterates that it relies on the Supreme Court Pilcom ruling, which was rendered in the context of non-resident. Vidur, any quick thoughts? Is justification or reliance on Pilcom ruling will make this question, will make this answer valid, or this justification?
I think the question that you rightly pose is when you're referring to 28 subsection 4, then it itself is coming out from the fact that it's a monetary or non-monetary, and there has to be a benefit, and there has to be an element of taxability. But the way it is being drafted, the way it is being mentioned that Pilcom, they've referred to that if there is a rate given in a specific section, then unlike a 195 where it's only a sum which is released or sum chargeable, here it's an amount which is being given. I think we'll have to go by what's been mentioned here.
Bansal Saab, Pilcom was rendered in the context of non-resident, and that was a very specific situation. Now, how can Pilcom validate this question, this answer?
Pilcom, as you rightly said, 190 in itself, subsection 1 in itself refers to income only.
Right.
It reads as notwithstanding that regular assessment in respect of any income is to be made later in the assessment. So, unless income element is there, so 194 will not be attracted accordingly. Yeah. And the Supreme Court has very rightly pondered on this 190 section in the decision of Brijlal versus CIT 328 ITR 477. They have clarified subsection 1 of 190.
Yeah. Now coming to the second question, where I said that the Act uses the phrase provision and the Act uses the phrase before releasing, and that's where the before releasing comes in. If you read this particular question, which extracts the subsection 1, and the question is it necessary that it must be in kind for 194 to operate? So to answer this, they extract the first proviso to subsection 1 of 194R, and it says that before releasing the obligation of 194R has to be complied, and therefore the Act clearly brings within its scope the situations where benefit or perquisite is in cash or in kind or partly in cash or partly in kind. So there could be some working capital issues associated with it, assuming that there is a non-cash provision of benefit of perquisite, because before releasing, the payer is obligated to comply with provisions of 194R. Now it is a different matter that what is the timing of releasing and what is the timing of provision. Is provision akin to release in terms of its timing? क्या रिलीज पहले होगा या प्रोविजन पहले होगा या प्रोवाइड करने समय रिलीज होगा, वो एक अपने आप में विचित्र देखने वाली बात है. The draftsman could have used a consistent provision language, but if it has used a different phrase, then there is a deliberate intention, as we understand as student of law. So we have to harmonize this release and payment. Now coming to the third question, very interesting question. What happens if the benefit or perquisite is in the form of capital asset? So अगर recipient के लिए ये capital asset है, which of course does not fall within the ordinary definition of income or much less income for income tax purposes, will 194 R will be pressed into service, to which the answer is that go back to question number 1. There is no requirement to check whether the perquisite or benefit, there is no requirement to check whether the perquisite or the benefit whether the perquisite or benefit is taxable in the hands of the recipient. So, Bansal Saab, your views on question number 3.
Number 3.
If it is a capital asset being received in the hands of the recipient, the guidance says that, well, 194R would come into service, and they are citing some court decision to illustrate this point.
Section 1, subsection 2 of section 190 clearly describes that the tax deduction does not have any impact upon the chargeability of income or whether it is not. So tax deduction is a tool with the government to collect the tax. In this manner, whether it is taxable or not can be examined in the hands of recipient. So you are knowing the position that the payer, it may be in the hands of payer, it is a capital asset, but he is claiming deduction of that under section 37 or whatever it may be. And then recipient may be some ordinary person who is receiving it as a capital asset. So assessment is entirely a different thing, whether income, it is income or not. There are so many other things also. So they are saying that at the point of giving, it is not necessary to examine that whether it will be in the hands of the recipient, it is capital asset or it is revenue asset, whatever it may be. So they are giving some examples. This can be one of the interpretation, but subsection 2 of section 190 clearly describes that it does not have any impact on the charging section, subsection 1 of section 4. This is
okay. We move.
Other difficulty is that releasing will certainly create problem, because when you are in a conference, you are giving some benefit before releasing. You have to ensure each participant, whether participant will come or not. So how one person can before releasing ensure that the taxes have been paid, something like that.
Right. Okay. So thank you for that. Now let's look at the fourth guidance. We have total 10 guidance. The fourth guidance is interesting. It says whether sales discount, cash discount, rebates are benefit or perquisite, and to which the answer is sales discount, cash discount, rebate allowed to customer from listed price represents lesser realization. Logically, these are benefits though related to sale and purchase. Now this is very important.
Very important, and
yeah. I am trying to bring to the attention this very important line. Since TDS under 194R is applicable on all forms of benefit and perquisite, tax is required to be deducted. My simple question is, if I'm a smart businessman, I end up negotiating better than others. There is a contractual bargain which I achieve on account of better commercial negotiation. Is my business being able to do business in a little more efficient manner and getting that extra rupee or paisa, does it mean that I have earned a benefit or there is a perquisite? Because the language of the circular which I have tried to highlight is very dangerous. It says आपको कुछ डिस्काउंट मिल गया, कैश मिला, सेल मिला या रिबेट मिला, लिस्ट प्राइस से अगर आपको कम मिला तो वो अपने आप में बेनिफिट ऑफ परक्यूजिट है. क्यों मिला, किस हालात में मिला, कैसे मिला, उसका कोई इससे रेलेवेंस नहीं है. तो एनी बेनिफिट अकॉर्डिंग टू द टैक्समैन is a perquisite under 28, is a perquisite because you have received this during the course of carrying out your business or profession. So a commercial bargain, a contractual bargain would result in a benefit or a perquisite, and tax should have been deducted at the first place. But this is a subject matter of difficulty and therefore tax is not required to be deducted. Now what happens tomorrow? The department feels that there is an adequate machinery, there will not be any difficulty. तो साहब अगर आपने कोई better price realize कर लिया है अपने competitor से, तो या otherwise also आपने better contract bargain कर लिया है, तो ये एक benefit और perquisite आपको business में arise हो रहा है, तो इस पे TDS कटेगा. I find this very far reaching. I mean, what is that we are trying to bring within the remit of 194R? Any business activity will be brought into the remit of 194R. I mean, commercial negotiations on agreeable prices are contractual bargains. Can they result, or can it be said that they are a benefit or a perquisite which is being realized? Bansal Sahab, this requires some consideration.
Asimji, since they have ultimately what they have said that these to remove difficulty, it is clarified that on the above fact no tax is required. Now, so far as it concerned to three items, sale discount, cash discount, and rebate. I think that there will be no difficulty for these transactions. They have further extended this provision to another things. Now they are. You are discussing step by step. Na? So for these three things, I think
yes, I am discussing question by question.
Because they have elaborated, that will create problem.
My worry is, Bansal Sahab, that the viewpoint of the taxman is that essentially 194R is applicable on all forms of benefit and perquisite, and tax is required to be deducted. वो ये नहीं कह रहे कि इन पे टैक्स कटना नहीं चाहिए, वो तो कह रहे हैं कि साहब कन्वीनियंस की वजह से मैं कह रहा हूँ आप टैक्स मत काटिए, बट एट द फर्स्ट प्लेस इस पे टैक्स कटना चाहिए था क्योंकि ये बेनिफिट और परक्यूजिट है. आई एम मोर वरीड अबाउट देयर thought process in terms of what is their understanding of benefit or perquisite during the course of
line also for that para is there. However, seeing the subject to these deduction or benefit or perquisites, and there could be another seller.
वो तो कह रहे हैं कि सिर्फ
कैश डिस्काउंट
रिमूवल ऑफ डिफिकल्टी के लिए टैक्स नहीं कटना है.
So in the interpretation, Asim, it's saying that it is a perquisite. That's what they're saying. Only for the administrative purposes.
That is what the dangerous situation is. Now tomorrow they may say there is no difficulty. In a sense, we had said that these are benefits and perquisite. So you ought to comply with 194R. It's more about the ethos and the mindset rather than the dispensation given by virtue of saying that to remove difficulties we are excluding it. But at the first place, it is a benefit of perquisite, but there is some difficulty in enforcement, so we are excluding this. But on first principles, they believe it has to be included. That's what my worry is, Vidur.
And also, yeah.
But in first two lines, they have specifically mentioned sale discount, cash discount, or rebate allowed to customers from the listed retail price represent lesser realization of the sale price itself. This is the reason
Right.
given by them. To
Agree.
that extent, purchase price or customer is also reviewed.
Yeah, but then you read the first sentence of the next paragraph, no?
Next para is unnecessary, and this is
In
just
fact, the first line itself is the line which starts with
it is
logically.
unnecessary. After having written first two lines,
Yeah.
they may not have given this opinion.
Yeah. Why these are benefits?
So when it is reduced from the sale price itself,
Yeah.
then purchase price is also the customer, he is getting it on that same. Where is the perquisite? Where is the benefit?
Yes, exactly. Now they are saying no, it is a benefit. Difficulty of implementation, तो बाहर निकाल देते हैं, but benefit है. Anyway, let me not labor more on this.
Any bounty to the
Yeah. Anyway, now they have given some further.
illustrations.
Yes, let's look at those illustrations and instances where, according to them, tax is required to be deducted, but the list is not exhaustive. So this is just a illustration, as Bansal Sahab has rightly said, something which is inclusive in nature and by no means exhaustive. So when you get some incentives like gold coin, cash or kind such as car, TV, etc., when a person sponsors a trip for the recipient and his or relative upon achieving a target, when a person provides free ticket for an event and free medical samples to the practitioner. Now, free medical samples to the practitioner. Vidur, let me come to you. A doctor getting 20, 30 medical samples which are stamped not for sale, and let's say he gets 20 samples of ORS concussion, कि आपका अगर पेट खराब हो या तबीयत खराब हो तो ये 20 सैंपल हैं, उससे उसको क्या बेनिफिट मिल रहा है?
Especially
What benefit is deriving?
yes, especially when you're saying these are not for sale, because these are samples which, whether it's a doctor or a chemist, he'll just keep it there on his shop or on the counter. So he will not be able to utilize it. There's no benefit which is coming to him directly, especially when it's mentioned not for sale. Because agar aap once we go and when we look at question number 6, which we'll do it later, where there is a benefit or an asset given to a person, but he's not able to utilize it and he returns it to the manufacturer, then they say it's not a perquisite because it's for use only. It's the same way a free sample where I'm not being able to consume myself. I'm not a consumer of that, or nor am I going to be able to sell that. That should not be within this part of it. And interestingly, when you talked about, very interestingly, these are all talked about freebies to doctors. And while reading this, I remember reading section 37 also, where the entire section was about freebies being given, and there was an amendment in explanation 3. And I think recently Apex Laboratories also in Supreme Court has said that that these freebies are not a deductible expense. So why are these examples coming in where it's not permissible at all for a freebies to be given to the doctor? I mean, that's another thought process.
Okay, that's helpful. Apex Laboratories and section 37, yeah, that decision was a very emphatic decision. Bansal Sahab, एक situation है, I'm stretching it far, we say sales discount, cash discount or rebate.
Yes.
Rebate allowed.
Rebate allowed.
To customer from lesser realization of sale price, right?
Yes.
And to that extent price is reviewed. अभी कल को कोई एक municipal taxes collect करता है कोई private entity, right? और वो कोई एमनेस्टी स्कीम दे देते हैं, आपने लिस्ट प्राइस से कम टैक्स पे किया है, तो क्या वो परक्यूजिट है? I mean, I'm just throwing a offhand example.
Now this you are talking about the payment made to the government.
Yeah, I'm assuming that I'm paying to an entity which is not a government, because it's a government will be an excluded entity.
That is entity. So taxes can be levied by government only entity.
I agree. If there was a private collection agent who had been given this task to collect with some rebate, then you would have said it's a discount. Anyway,
It
that's just an hypothetical.
relate to sale.
Yeah.
नहीं,
It does
असीम
not
इसका एक
relate
लाइव एग्जांपल है
to sale.
uh,
Because that price will be shown by him only in the books, whichever is paid by him. He will not gross it with the MRP. So the reason they have given is in the first two lines, lesser realization of sale price, and
Yeah,
to
yeah,
that
but then it says logically these are also benefits. Yeah, Vidur, you had a point.
So when I researched, there was a big debate, and there is a matter which is pending in Supreme Court. SLP is pending on 194H. There are three examples I'll quickly take because we'll build upon that and make it interesting. When there are hotels and travel and there are airlines, when they give it as a discount to the travel agents, whether that discount is a commission or no. So there were two matters which are pending in SLP, and Bombay High Court has decided. One is in the case of Vodafone, where the SIM cards were sold to the distributor, and distributor had a discount and they were selling it. And also there were super religare laboratories where there were collection agents who were collecting samples, and there was a list price and they were collecting at a lower price. So there was a discount given to them. So whether this discount per se is commission or no under 194H. So what we're talking about is the same rebate, whether it's really a benefit or whether it's a commission or whether it's a sale transaction. So I think we must look into that also.
Yeah, but I thought we had that Ahmedabad stamp vendor Supreme Court case also on this.
Right, but these are the ones which are actually pending because that's the thing, 194H, whether it's applicable or not, whether it's a discount or is it a commission. Here we are also saying discount can be a benefit as a perquisite, 194R. You're pushing the envelope.
So
as far as discount is concerned, one should also consider whether it is abatement of sale price. So instead of selling at 100, we are selling it at 90 rupees, and it is neither commission nor it is just abatement of sale price. So no
Correct.
issue of any perquisition.
yeah, very right, sir.
Correct.
Yeah, that at the threshold stage is taken
And
care of.
yeah, there is the judgment of some Indian Express newspapers also.
Yeah. So now coming back to free samples, Vidur, again the circular clarifies. Look at these lines. It is clarified that the situation,
relaxation would not apply to this.
yeah, free samples are given. The relaxation would not apply in the cases of free sample given. So that they are further clarifying this again. Now moving on, and then they try to justify why free medicine samples provided by a company to a doctor who's an employee or to a doctor who's a consultant should be a subject matter of this purely on account of tax equalization basis, that if you are providing him, then it will be perquisite and it will be taxable in his hands, and you can do a TDS, and therefore everything gets equalized to that extent. I don't think whether this is a right and a germane logic to justify benefit or perquisite being taxed at the first instance under 194, or to say that at the end of the day it's a level playing field of taxation, because hospital will get a credit, and when the perquisite taxation happens there will be a TDS of 192 in his hand, so finally everything will fall in line. I just don't think it makes any sense. Now question number 5 talks of how valuation should be carried out. Now this is very interesting, especially when we are talking more of situations of non-monetary or non-cash situations. But before that, I must also hasten to add that provisions of 194R shall not apply, as Bansal Saab rightly mentioned, if you are talking of situations which deals with benefit, where situations where benefit of perquisite is being provided to a government entity like government hospitals not carrying on business or profession. So if you are talking about those entities, then government hospitals, etc., then this is pretty much not provided, not applicable, so to speak. Now, coming to the question with regard to valuation,
You have not deliberate also in these hospitals, some bit, little more.
हाँ बताएं बंसल साहब
Doctors
प्लीज.
and employees, they have distinguished who is employee, who is consultant, and
Right.
all things will make all the things very, very complicated. All these things.
Yeah. I mean, this is a compliance nightmare.
It will be a very difficult task for the hospitals and all these things to implement all these things.
Okay, let's look at question 5. Now we are almost halfway in terms of looking at the guidance, and we've crossed the 1 hour mark also. How the valuation would be carried out. Now, it talks of an FMV related concept except in following cases. The valuation would be based on FMV of the benefit of perquisite. So FMV what? Qua recipient or qua the one who is providing? So that's one question. Is it going to be what I perceive is the benefit in my hand, or the value which the provider is going to assign or believes is the value? So that's one. But there are two exceptions. One is where you have made secondary purchases, then that is the value for the that would be the value which shall be pegged in case of secondary purchases. लेके आपने provide कर दिया तो जिस भाव लिया वो value हो जाएगी. And if similarly, if you are a captive manufacturer and then the price it charges to its customer for such items shall be value for the benefit or perquisite. So Maruti will have a list sale price for its customer, and let's say there is a case which falls within 194R, the not its manufacturing cost, but the price it charges to the customer shall be the price for benefit of perquisite, not what is its cost in its books of accounts. That's my quick reading or understanding of this. Any thoughts on 5 before we move further? Of course, thankfully.
GST is not.
हाँ वो थैंकफुली ठीक है, वो मान ली बात आपकी उनकी बंसल साहब, नहीं तो वही झगड़ा हो जाता चुरंगी सेल्स ब्यूरो वाला पुराना. राइट. Question 6 is social media influencer. Vidur, do you want to quickly give your thoughts on this? Question 6, please.
No, I think I was very interestingly, there was an article in HT yesterday also,
Yeah.
how India, when we talk about digital, the way that moved on, this social media influencer are a big ticket item, because we don't realize that how the bloggers or they are being rewarded, and they are being really rewarded by way of monetary, other than monetary benefits. So really, they've never been showing that benefit. You get a free shoe, or you get a free some sort of an airline ticket. That have never been taxed, but now with this, it's in a big way that they will be taxed, and there will be a TDS deduction on that. So I think this is a big ticket item in my view, in the way that India is moving into the Gen Z, as we may call it, with the social.
Yeah, but
media.
remember, if your influencer comes and checks on a restaurant and enjoys a very nice 7-course meal, then he cannot return that benefit.
He's utilized that benefit. He's had a great meal, so he's benefit out of that.
Right.
Technically, yes.
Okay, now coming to one question which sort of is a pain point for all professionals who are pretty much living out of the suitcase, is the reimbursement of out-of-pocket expenses. I mean, this is very strange. Now, mode of payment, as I understood as a first principle of law, cannot alter the character of transaction. Now, here you are trying to say that, well, if you have incurred some expenditure, depending on in whose name the invoice is being raised, will determine the fact that whether you have obtained a perquisite or you have obtained a benefit. Now, a busy chartered accountant like Mr. Raj Chawla will globe-trotter all over the world. Now, at a point in time, he may realize that traveling is a real pain now, but the department feels, no, you are getting a benefit and perquisite. So where is the benefit or perquisite? I just don't understand. And then the best part is, look at the way in which the answer is being framed. If the invoice is obtained in the name of the client, which is X, Yeah, let's see this paragraph. If the invoice is obtained in the name of X, which is the client, and accordingly, if it is paid by consultant and reimbursed by client, in this case, since the expense is paid by the consultant, for which the reimbursement is incurred wholly and exclusively for the purpose of rendering service to the client and invoices in the name of client, then the reimbursement will not be considered as benefit of perquisite. Now, merely the mode of invoicing will determine the nature of character of transaction ki ye benefit hai or nahi hai. And if the invoice is not in the name of X, then the payment is made by X directly. It is a benefit or perquisite provided by X to the consultant, for which the deduction has to be made under 194R. I mean, I have my serious reservation. Chitle Sahib, I would rather urge yourselves to kindly take this up at the highest level with the North Block, that all out-of-pocket expenditure situations may just result in an additional incidence of TDS. I mean, this is quite a housekeeping exercise. I don't think that this is the true intent of provision of benefit or a perquisite.
Yeah, we will certainly do that. And particularly this out-of-pocket expenses particularly may not have any income element where
Yes.
they are reimbursed at cost. So this will not also be within the theme of TDS.
You have rightly raised it. This is trying to circumvent the question number 30 of the famous circular 715 issued in the context of 194C, 194J, where they have categorically said that reimbursements do not have an element of income and the question of TDS does not arise. Now, whether it is in my name or client's name, if there is a proper mechanism and I'm traveling only at the instance of client, where is the question of benefit or perquisite arising at the first instance? This is certainly not the true intent or import of it. And
yeah, we will draft a circular. Maybe Rajbhai can circulate it with you, and with
yes,
those
sir.
your inputs we can submit.
Yeah, and you've rightly said, sir, what you have said is pretty much, kindly see this first paragraph of the answer of question number 7. Expenditure, which is the liability of a person carrying on business, if met by the other person, is the benefit provided by the second person to the first person. Now, a client gives me a call at 11 in the night hurriedly and says, take the first flight and come, and say, no, I'll say, no, traveling for you is my benefit or perquisite. तो पहले आप टिकट कराएंगे, आप इनवॉइस कीजिए, तभी मैं आने वाला हूँ, नहीं तो आप TDS काटेंगे.
Only in this representation we can ask Bansal Sahab that whether this stands to constitutional validity also, because where there is no income element, how you
Yes.
can require TDS?
I think Bansal Saab should join us very soon back. Bansal
Okay,
Saab, this
okay.
question number 7 requires your consideration.
Yes, it's very much difficult when expenses is reimbursed. That is also they are saying that it is our liability,
Yes.
and if we have to incur the expenses as professional.
Yeah.
When
Now it is our liability. Now, okay, let us come to the interesting part of it.
They are giving the opinions, they are giving the interpretation, which is not their job at all.
Okay, now coming
They
to the
elaborate
last.
it like this, because it will create difficulty for everyone.
Yeah. Now, coming to the last 3 questions, 8, 9, and 10. If there is a dealer conference to educate the dealer, is it a benefit of perquisite? Now, to which very happily the department has issued this guidance saying that, well, ordinarily it is not a benefit or perquisite. So they start in a positive way, in a business friendly way, right? And then they highlight few situations that in case where the conference is held with the prime objective. अब एक objective तो है, पर उसके आगे एक prime भी word आ गया. If there is a prime objective to educate dealer about any one of the following aspects: new product, discussion, order, teaching, sales technique, addressing queries, reconciliation of account with dealers. Now, what if you are meeting dealers just to ensure that there is a good bon harmony, you want that touch and feel, and you want to just understand, talk about them. So you need to ensure that your agenda of discussion should have at least one of these 6 or all of these 6.
So
And
you
is
have
there paperwork which has to be done? And then who will decide whether 194R should happen or should not happen? And then it's not over as yet. It says that conference must not be in the nature of incentive benefit to select dealers who have achieved a particular target. वो अगर होगी तो ये benefit ही है. Now what if the conference is being held to incentivize who have achieved a target, and you want to discuss everything also, product also, new launch also, queries also, reconciliation also, you want to do at one go. You want to economize on working capital, you want to economize on time, you want to economize on effort.
this is against the principle that department cannot put himself into the shoes of the businessman.
Absolutely. Walchand and Company, Dalmia Bharat, n number of judgments are there. And then it says that the following should be considered. ये तो होगा ही होगा. As benefit. Now, expense attributable to a leisure trip or a leisure component if it is incidental to dealer business or conference. अभी डीलर बिजनेस और कॉन्फ्रेंस में आप गए 3 दिन के लिए, उन्होंने कहा साहब जिम फ्री है आपको, आपने जिम यूज कर लिया, तो वो एक कंपोनेंट है क्या? वो बेनिफिट और परक्यूजिट है. एंड व्हाट इफ योर बेटर हाफ हैज टू ट्रैवल विद यू फॉर मेडिकल रीजंस. I mean, you don't want to travel alone. You are at that age in your life where you don't want to travel alone. And then there are overstays or prior stays. So expenses attributable to a leisure trip. Now a destination will decide it is a leisure trip or not. If you go to Surat, is it leisure? Do you go to Guwahati, is it leisure? Or do you go to Goa, it is leisure? अभी 3 जगह गए ना सब लोग घूमने. सूरत भी गए, गुवाहाटी भी गए और गोवा भी गए. विच इज लेजर? So are we trying now? The immense paperwork has to be generated.
Yes.
Or you want to stop dealer conferences? Vidur, do you have any views on this? And I have one question for you. All these 3 items, are they cumulative in nature?
Which 3 items are we referring to?
This 1, 2, 3 on attributable to leisure, or these are they have to be interpreted as either or.
As either or. Yeah. It cannot be all together. Yeah. Any of the items you take.
Any of these items, if present, they will not be considered as out of the scope of 194.
Yes. So it will be subject to TDS. It will be a benefit.
Okay, so now comes the penultimate question. To me, question number 9, those of you who already read the guidance, to me it is completely contrary to question number 1. So question 9 and 1 themselves are antithesis or self-contradictory in nature. Question number 1 said, if you can recap, that regardless of the fact that this has any income component or whether it is taxable, the obligation is to comply with 194R. That was essentially question number 1. Now look at 9. 9 says that if the benefit, question is if the benefit of perquisite is in kind, partly in cash, then how do we ensure that the tax required is to be deducted or has been paid? Now let's look at the answer. Now question number 1, as I said that there is no requirement whether the amount is taxable in the hands of the recipient or not. That was the essence of 1. Now let's look at 9. The answer is the requirement of law is that if the person is providing the benefit in kind to the recipient and tax is required to be deducted. Right? Tax is required to be deducted. The person is required to ensure that the tax required to be deducted has been paid by the recipient. Such recipient would pay tax in the form of advance tax. The tax deductor may rely on the declaration along with the copy of the advance tax. Now what if I believe that as a recipient this is not something which falls within the meaning of income chargeable to tax in my hands as the recipient? That is what my question is. And further, the department says additionally in the alternate an option to remove difficulty. If any, the benefit provider may deduct the tax under 194R and pay to the government. Now, what if I believe that this is not taxable at the first instance? Will you foist and you will obligate me? नहीं साहब आप टैक्स जमा करा के पहले मुझे दिखाओ आपने एडवांस टैक्स पे किया है कि नहीं किया. So this to my mind runs or militates contrary to question number 9. Bansal sahab, any thoughts on this?
The burden is overdrawn. Declaration along with copy of advance tax payment challan provided.
I believe I have taken an opinion from you that this is not taxable in my hands. It is capital receipt, or it for various reasons it does not. I want to take a view that this is not income.
Not income, then tax is not deductible
Yeah,
accordingly.
but then what are you trying to say in 9? You are saying कि नहीं मुझे आप advance tax का चालान दिखाओ.
That is contrary to that
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
Sir, an advance tax installment may not be due also. Supposing
Absolutely.
in the month of May, advance tax may not be due. It will be due.
Yeah.
And I see in the second paragraph of this, I don't know whether we're reading the same way, it talks about that if the tax is being deposited out of my pocket and I don't recover, I mean, that's the assumption, I don't recover from them, then there's a tax on tax. That's the flavor of this, because it says tax should also be treated as a perquisite. So you're talking about that section 195A, tax on tax.
Then it get grossed up, no?
Grossed up.
Yeah.
If I don't recover that amount from them later or at any point of time.
Right. Then we come to the last question. And before we, of course, let's do the last question first, and then I'll come on to the fact that some of the decisions cited in this particular circular have been overruled, especially that Madras High Court decision on 28.4. And the fact that Mahindra and Mahindra clearly says that you're looking at the non-monetary part of it, 404 ITR page.
Contrary to Mahindra and Mahindra.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, let us look at the last question, which is question number 10. We still have sufficient time. Now, this is with regard to the timing of coming into effect. Now, since it is 1st July and the second proviso says that how do we compute the aggregation part of it? This is, Vidur, you are going to take this up in your presentation, no? This particular question.
Not this one.
Okay,
but I
so
can,
then
I will take it up. Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so I think with this, I'll pretty much hand it over to Vidur for a very quick. Vidur, you have 10 minutes because we are 6:23. So if you can finish by 6:35 on your presentation, then we have to hear from Garg Saab. Garg Saab is making some very good notes of our deliberation, and he wanted to speak at the end, and then we look at what all we have in store for Q&A. So Vidur, very quickly try and screen share your presentation.
I think you've beautifully taken to all the questions, but what my presentation is more on summarizing what we've discussed, and in 10 minutes give a quick...
Yeah, you have 12 minutes with you. The technical team can assist Mr. Puri if he needs any help on screen sharing, please.
Can you see my... Is it visible? Is it? Great. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, this is regarding 194R, and as we all put in whether the guidelines are for removal or doubts. I mean, we have put it the other way around to show that whether it is not. So we will cover just basic the section that we've all talked about and how the circular has come in, and I'll cover only one or two questions in a summary form. So as we discussed, and as Mr. Bansal rightly mentioned, this is coming out ditto from section 28 subsection 4, and the definition itself, where in 1964 the memorandum itself said that it is whether convertible into money or not. So any benefit or perquisite received by a person in exercise of his business or profession. So the whole crux is coming out from that section. How the rationale behind that is, if we see, the memorandum mentioned that it is because the recipients do not report the receipt on in their return, which is what I mentioned in question number 6 when we look at that in the social media, when we get those benefits. Those were not being reported in the tax returns. So the memorandum mentioned there is no mechanism at the moment available with the revenue to capture the transactions or collect this information. And in order to track this, these TDS provisions have come into play. 194R completely, we've discussed this. Asim has taken us word by word, just a flow in terms of where it's applicable, how it is. Will not spend time on this. The general understanding of the perquisite is to be an advantage over a regular consideration. May or may not be monetary. Person gets a right to use the benefit as per his terms. So there has to be a right and there has to be a benefit which he can use himself. The question is whether pure reimbursements can be termed as a benefit. I think we've discussed this in the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes, whether it's not. But my take home is that there has to be a right and there has to be a benefit which it has to be consumed by that person. We've looked at section 119 because what we were discussing when we started this was whether it's binding on both parties or no. So it was not issued under 119, it is under 194R2, and 194R3 gave us the powers, or gave the statute the powers to do that. As what we discussed internally and initially was whether it's ultra-virus itself, the section 194R2 and subsection 3, that's a question to be seen. But my point here is it is not coming out of 119, it is coming out of 194R. Therefore, reading by a plain reading, it is binding on both because the section itself provides the binding factor. Section, so when we looked at the circular, there's another circular which came in subsequently, which was both for the purposes of how the various forms are being amended for this as well as for the digital asset. Circular number 12 and 21st June 2022 has amended Form 26Q. This Form 26Q looked at where you have to provide the information, and where there is an actual deduction, it will go into a Form 16A. When there is a TDS, you can see my next slide also. Okay. Is that okay? Let me. Okay. I've got a couple of slides to go. I think we can just go through with that if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let's not waste time on that. Fine. So 26Q has been amended. 26Q has been amended to take into account the information which is required to be filed now for the purpose of TDS, where apart from the TDS being deducted, if we take a declaration from the deductee, that information is required to be also reported in the code 94RP. That's where we were saying there's an amendment in the rules and forms. Now, all the questions have been taken note of, but one question that was question number 1, whether 28.4 was how it is coming into the play. I think it was about 28.4 and it distinguished the principal than 195. We've discussed this. We've also gone into the fact of sales discount and cash discount. This is question number 4. I've kept myself open only to 3 questions. That was question number 4 is the second part of it, about sales discount and cash discount. The reason why we stopped here for a minute was the research that we did about the 194H. That again comes back into the play that whether all discounts will come into the benefit as the definition of benefit or no. So here, I think the plain reading it as it was also brought by Mr. Chitle to say that if it is really the rate which has been discounted and the rate has been reduced, it per se is not a discount, it's not a rebate, it's the rate which is reduced itself. So there should be no benefit, perquisite, or even a 194H application. These were the illustrators which were used. The trigger ultimately is whether these are being utilized by the person. So in example, question number 4 was, what is a benefit and what is not a benefit? So the example I mentioned about a benefit, if the seller has 12 boxes and they are sold for a price of 10, that means the person or the dealer did not retain any box for himself, but he gave it to the consumer. So there's no benefit available to him. But if there are any free boxes or free candies along with those 10 medicines, then those candies, if are not passed on to the ultimate customer, but being utilized by the dealer, that's a benefit to the dealer. I think that's where the distinction they try to bring in the example about the pricing or the retention of a particular box or a freebie, as we may call it, retained by the dealer, which is being consumed himself. The example of hospital whether the hospital uses it or the consultant uses or the employee uses it, the ultimate test is to be who utilizes that and where does the buck stop in a way. If it is for the benefit of that person, then whether it's a hospital, it'll stop there. If it is for the consultant or the employee, it'll be passed on to them because that benefit is being utilized by the ultimate recipient. I think that's where the trick was, who the recipient is, where the consumption is. And the last one was the social media influencer. I can push this to an example where we also have the models or the actors who are given certain, say a manyavar. If a manyavar clothes are being given, possibly they were never being in the frame of being used by the actor. And if it is returned back to manyavar, then it is not a perquisite. But if it is retained by the model or the actor, then whether it's a social media or an actor, this circular brings into play that this particular benefit will be taxable and there will be a TDS deduction which will trigger off under 194. I think that's where I just wanted to summarize quickly, Aseem. We've all discussed that, but it was just more of a quick run through as to what we've discussed and put it down in a couple of slides for our participants.
If I'm audible, just one thought here. I'm reminded of that Karnataka High Court decision which we had in TTK Healthcare TPA, that the nature of payment in the hands of recipient is the determinative of deductibility of liability. So you have to look at it from the perspective of the recipient, and that's where I think question number 1 has really gone off tangent, so to speak, and pretty much alters the dynamics of the settled interpretive rules with regard to how do you look at the TDS provisions all this while.
True.
And again, again on first principles I've spoken, but just quick 2 thoughts which comes to my mind are the decisions of, as I said, we had the KP Varghese decision, but we had this Keshav Rajaviji also, which is a 1990 sort of Supreme Court decision, which says that circular cannot even impose on taxpayer. Circular cannot impose on a taxpayer a burden higher than what the Act itself on a true interpretation envisages. The task of interpretation of laws is the exclusive domain of the court. And it was also noted that, however, support of certain judicial observation for the view that the circulars could be an external aid to construction, but then the courts relied on the famous, Bansal Saab would recollect the famous State Bank Travancore decision on that real income theory, where they said that circulars are executive in character and cannot alter the provisions of the Act. So this is where my grievance as a student of law is. And even the famous decision of Catholic Syrian Bank also says that circular somehow can tone down the rigors and ensure a fair enforcement of provision. And therefore, these cannot be ignored, but they cannot detract or override the provisions of the Act. And they should seek to mitigate the rigor. Now, here you are raising the bar of the hardship. अभी रिलीज करना है आपको बेनिफिट, अभी प्रोवाइड करना है, रिलीज करना है, अभी कितना टैक्स कटेगा, आपको मिल रहा है, ये क्यों मिल रहा है, circumstantially, the onerous paperwork. I mean, it seems that the executive is gunning after the medical fraternity, but let's not be shy away from the fact that how much cost to the mankind they have done in last 2-3 years. But you all have fringe and all kinds of elements all around, but you can't paint everybody with that same brush and have this knee-jerk reaction. You have 36, section 37 already amended. You have this thing coming. So are you trying to bring the FBT regime back in one way or the other? So anyway, as I said, the more I read this on constitutional aspect, I just feel a little more animated on this. Apart from the great compliance, look at how you guys will have to advise your clients in terms of tweaking their SAP systems in dealing with the intermediaries, the dealers, the people in supply chain, and if you get a good bargain, then you are getting a perquisite. बंसल साहब, वो जो डिसीजंस थे वॉश आउट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के वर्सेस स्पेक्यूलेशन, वॉश आउट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को आप 37(1) में एडमिसिबल मान लेते थे, अब वो सभी वॉश आउट हो गया जी. अब तो ये 194R has sort of a great scope on this. I think we should request Garg Saab if he is able to join. Else I'll ask Bansal Saab to give his views before we hand it over to our very dynamic Vice Chairman Rajji for his thoughts and take up few Q&As. So Bansal Saab, a few minutes if you want to speak,
Yes.
and then we'll take some questions also.
Very summarily, this 194R is brought under Chapter 17. At the head, that collection and recovery of tax.
Yeah.
It is a mode of recovery of tax, thought-wise. Now, the reason, as rightly pointed out, is that these type of transactions, all which are considered as benefit and or perquisites, these are mostly go unreported. It is claimed by the businessman in his books of account as an expenditure, but it is not reported in the hands of the recipient what benefit he has received. So rightly, for that purpose, for collection of tax, this section has been brought. But subsection 2 of section 190 clearly states that it is not it has no impact, deduction of tax has no impact upon the charge of tax. What is chargeable to tax has to examine from the another angle, not from the point of view of deduction of tax. First principle of law is this. And then you say that the subsection 1 of section 194R is bodily lifted, as I have already told, and it is there also. So we have to go to the precedents which are already available on this issue, that what is the perquisite, what is the benefit, which are chargeable to tax. So income element is always there according to subsection 1 of section 190. The another principle of law which is well established is that the circulars can be issued by the CBDT under section 119 as a inherent power, the CBDT given under section 1. Even then, again in this particular section they have brought that CBDT has such and such power. So this is repetition of whatever is there already. So they are making it binding upon that taxpayer also and service provider also and revenue authorities also. This is mandate of law. and mandate of law as decided by Honorable Supreme Court regarding circulars are that if they are benevolent in nature, they have to be followed. Irrespective of that, it is giving benefit apart from statutory provisions to the assessee. And the other part of circular is to remove difficulties, whatever it may be. So remove difficulties, they can relax the statute, and we can say and we can compel the authorities that these circulars, being benevolent circular, removing the difficulty, you have to follow. And court will also admit that there, where the circulars are beneficial to the assessee, they must be complied with by the revenue authorities. So to that extent, we are protected. Whatever is written in favorably in the circular, to that extent, we are protected by the circular. So we cannot say that that part is also not applicable. Now, what goes against whatever the settled principles of law are there, the circular. So this circular is subject to agitation, and we can take recourse permitted by law to go against that. So these are the basic principle, and you will see with one thing you have not noticed. In this circular, through three stances, they have referred to substance of the provision. This is coming into, this is coming into question number 4. When this is answered, it is further clarified by virtue of their relation with the recipient entity, and in substance, the benefit has been provided. So they are referring to substance. Again, they are referring to substance. 2-3 places they are referring to substance. So, as rightly pointed out earlier, that the CBDT has nothing to do with the interpretation of the statutory provision.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the interpretation. So they are taking in their hands the action which they do not possess at all, because interpretation is for the courts.
Yes.
So defining and taking substance to the certain decisions without hearing to the other party is only an opinion expressed that cannot have the force of law. If you have some decision contrary to, you have every right. Now, what is that obligation of deduction? There is compliance, more compliance, than there will be complications. There will be points of hesitations. You will say that this is contrary to the law. A revenue authority will say that it is mandated in the circular. So all these difficulties are going to come, and businessman has been put to a very great difficulty, and this circular is against very well-established principles of law, that revenue authorities cannot sit into the shoes of the businessman, and when they cannot decide that what expenditure they have to incur, at what point of time they have to incur, and what is the appropriate time, what is the appropriate expenditure. So they are not getting any income, but they have been laden with the burden of compliance, more compliance. And recipient, just to get information, they have made these provisions. The reporting is not there by the recipient. That is the main reason for bringing all these things. So on 1 minute, I am concluding.
No, sir, please take your time. We have time.
So this is only to more burden on the recipient. Rather, they should invent certain way out. They have intelligence system, artificial intelligence system. Wherever any expenditure is claimed on account of conference, or they can examine the recipient, they can call for the information from them, and otherwise they can devise some other things to bring into the light these things. Only tax deduction is not a only source to get the information. So this is my overview.
Right. So, sir, one more thing. We remember we were mentioning about where the benefit or perquisite is being provided, where the recipient is a government entity like government hospital not carrying on any business or profession.
Yes.
So for all tax exempt status or all entities which are hitherto claiming tax exemption status, 194R will not be applicable.
No, we are not taking like this. They have specifically written here, government, nothing else.
So it says government entity like government hospital. I'm reading the last
One minute.
lines of question number 4.
Question number 4,
Last line. So is it only government or quasi-government or the institutions which fall within the definition of state, so to speak? Or it is because it says like government hospital, not carrying on business or
government
profession.
entity like government hospital,
Right.
not carrying, it will be interpreted like this only.
Oh. Oh.
Because like government hospital, but like government hospital, it cannot be. Otherwise, like word should not be there.
Right.
If they have to restrict it only government hospital, then like word should not be there.
Right. Understood.
So can I push this, Asim and Mr. Bansal, to say that if I give free medicines to a hospital which is charitable in nature, which is not carrying on business, so there it'll be in the nature of a donation and therefore 194R is not applicable. I am pushing that also.
Because they are not getting any benefit or purpose.
Benefit out of it. हाँ, तो उसको मैं फिर donation ले लूँगा, 194R नहीं काटूँगा. I want to be restricting to myself as 194R, whether there's an obligation or
For
not. So
example, this by virtue of question number 4, as we have.
Exactly. I'm pushing that.
Go back to Vidur, go back to 2004-5, the days of FBT, and the characterization in books of accounts came in, and then a long FAQ came, and matters went into the tribunal, and then most of the matters, of course, the taxpayer could convince the superior courts that there is no element of fringe benefit in this, and this exactly will throw up that subset or recreate that mini litigation one more time. That's what my apprehension is.
Will increase litigation.
Yeah.
Manifold.
Can we request the Secretariat, Mr. Ajay and Prachi ma'am, if there are any few questions? We have about few minutes before, hopefully, if we are fortunate enough for Garg Saab to jump in, and then our Honorable Vice Chairman Saab can eloquently conclude the session. If there are any questions, we could take it up if the chat box has any questions.
Sir, muted him.
Sir, Mr. Ajay has told me that he has given you password to read the question directly.
Okay.
Your staff,
sir.
yeah, because various questions are there, so you are requested to please take up.
Yeah, we will take up all the questions.
Sure, sir.
So I have downloaded the questions. What is the position of 194R on trade gifts given to retailer through stockists? So Vidur, this should clearly, 194R should clearly apply if there are gifts given to retailers through the stockists.
Yes, for sure, because retailer is also the one who's carrying on business, and stock is also carrying on business. So if it is in the nature of business and there are free gifts, 194R should be applicable.
Second question, Bansal Saab, is whether 194R will be applicable on travel or hotel. सिर्फ ट्रैवल पे होगा या होटल पे होगा या दोनों पे होगा?
Travel, hotel, if it is according to X, invoice system will play.
Yes.
Invoice system will play.
Right. Okay, third question is, will this be applicable to travel and stay reimbursements to consultant? I think that we have discussed. वो कर लिया, और वो चितले साहब also has clarified that. Fourth, whether under this section you need to do grossing up, I think that also Vidur has already answered. And then there is a question, auditors normally charge OPs in their bills as per 194R. If there are no supporting, then is TDS required to be deducted, and whether TDS on OP can be deducted under J along with professional fees. So Vidur, the interplay of J in case of no supporting and 194R, how will you address this?
So what we understand is generally 194J will be applicable, and it was supposed to be applicable always, because if you have invoice being raised both for professional and out of pocket, the other party is expected to deduct under J. And as Mr. Bansal says, अगर वो pick up करता है and X and Y play जो invoice का किसके नाम पे, that will come into play. This is more on the side where the other party is picking up the expenditure.
Otherwise, their interpretation is reimbursement of any expenditure is falling within the scope of 194.
24J. Anji.
Then we have four more questions. One, how to apply the provisions with regard to agent meeting, gala dinner to select agent based on performance. तो गाला डिनर तो फंस जाएंगे भाई, एजेंट मीटिंग है और आप उसमें कुछ सीरियस बातें डिस्कस कर रहे हैं और रिजॉर्ट पॉलिटिक्स नहीं कर रहे, तो फिर ठीक है, सब चलेगा. So you have to prove the fact that there was a serious intent of taking these people out to Goa. Rajji does lot of study-based excursion tours. I think he can lend a technology. He can share the technology that even if you go to a holiday destination, how do you maintain seriousness in terms of discussing the subject and the course curriculum? So it's very difficult.
इसमें loaded question है. I mean, if you see that, if the question is more on the fact that if it is an agent meeting, and in that meeting he's selected some of the star performers, the intent was never to take the star performance for a holiday or for a meeting or for a excursion. It was for an agent meeting, and one of the agenda was there. So in my view,
that's exactly what I said. What are you trying to say? First of all, the venue itself will create a lot of burden on you. If you are going to take everybody to Goa and say that we are going to discuss some serious business by the beach side, I think only I will believe. So it's very difficult to prove that.
They are forgetting the word prime also. You read?
Prime. वो बड़ा बढ़िया word था जी, prime. You are absolutely right. और वो कि भाई prime reason क्या था या primary purpose क्या था? And then before releasing you have to deduct. तो आप उसको गाला डिनर की टेबल प्लेट पकड़ाने से पहले आप करेंगे. Anyway, let's come to whether TDS is applicable. What are the perquisites covered in this section? Whether non-monetary perquisites are subject to TDS? Obviously, overwhelmingly yes. GST implication, circular is clear. GST is not going to be applicable, so that takes care of two questions. Now two more questions, Bansal Sahab, and one maybe for Vidur. Whether 194R will be applicable on discounts given as percentage of sale or per piece amount given post discount, maybe by mobile white good manufacturers. So discount की रूपरेखा से determine होगा 194R, किस तरह से discount दिया जा रहा है.
It is discount on sale. So it will be exempted because there will be difficulty.
Yeah.
Purchase price will be taken as reduced by the discount.
Now, then there is a generic question, what will be the position of 194R in case of various schemes given by FMCG to retailers through distributors, and who will be the payee? Whether the company will be the payee or it's the distributor who will be the payee. So it entirely depends how your invoicing will flow. Whether it's an invoicing, like if it's through a consignment sale, then you are clearly acting as an agent and not doing a reselling function. If you're doing a reselling function, then you step into the shoes of somebody who is providing that benefit. And if it is other than discount, so depending on the scheme, so now various schemes will be created which will be 194 friendly, so to speak, you know. And last two questions, Raji, I know you are looking at the watch, but we have two more questions. Whether 194R will be given on certain discount or whether the discount will be with or without GST. GST तो हमने डिस्कस कर ही लिया है. तो certain discount as percentage of sale वो out हो जाएगा. Post sale discount on achievement of target.
So that is not, that is subject to 194.
Yeah, that will get covered. Okay. Then last question. If GST is applicable on receiver of value considered as perquisite and TDS is deducted under 194R, for example, dealer receives a free TV on attainment of a target, will he have to pay GST on the value of TV twice, once in as income as perquisite? तब तो नहीं लगेगा. And when he actually sells it, जब बेचेगा तभी लगेगा. So, Raji, with your enthusiasm and your inspiration, we have tried to cover as many questions. But if there are more questions on the chat box, we can, or if you get it later from the volunteers and audience, I think you may have to come up with a small booklet the way you did on FBT. I remember at that point in time, there was some
Sure,
guidance
sir.
which came, so maybe you have to look into this. With this, I hand it over to you for your concluding remarks, and thank you once again for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. A very good evening to all the members of CA fraternity and my professional colleagues. I, on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, wholeheartedly thanks CA CB Chitle sir, the chairman of our Direct Tax Committee, and special thanks to CA Asim Chawla ji, Advocate IP Bansal ji, CA Vidur Puri ji, CA Sunil Garg ji, our eminent panelist of our today's webinar, and all viewers and listeners. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our esteemed panelists for their excellent deliberation in today's VCM on TDS under Section 194R on benefit or perquisite business or profession organized by Direct Tax Committee of ICI. I have this privilege for the members of the profession to listen to a great luminary on the topic of contemporary relevance. I take this opportunity to thank you once again for sparing your valuable time with us. I hope that viewers have gained vast knowledge and rich experience from this webcast. I would like to thank all Direct Tax Committee personnel who organized this VCM in a very efficient manner. On this note, I would like to conclude this VCM. In case you have any query or feedback, feel free to share it at ETC Direct Tax Committee at ICI.in. And I request Chairman sir also, Chitle sir, if you want to say something. Chitle sir, would you like to unmute, sir? Please unmute yourself. And I would also request our office secretariat to please, if you have any query which we have not taken up, please share with C. Asim Chawla ji so that he will reply the all queries. Kitla sir, would you like to say something? I think some connection error is there. So with this, I am thankful to all of you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Kitla sir, कुछ some. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you all.